I'm going to talk about the case of Michelle Gustafsson. This is part 2 of the Swedish Vampire couple. Michelle Gustafsson was born in 1988 and lived near Stockholm, Sweden with her parents and brother. When she was 12 years old, Michelle's parents divorced, which created a lot of instability in her family. Initially, she went together with her brother to live with their dad, but it wasn't easy for them as their father was a big drinker. Both Michelle and her brother would be beaten regularly, and several episodes ended up with police being called to their apartment. The dad even got in trouble once for beating him up, but both her and her brother can continue to stay with him. Already as a child, Michelle seemed different and almost always kept to herself. She had serious anger issues and could be very aggressive with others. Later diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and ADHD. Some of her medical journals also mention traits of antisocial personality disorder and schizophrenia, although she was never fully diagnosed with these disorders. Michelle had an extensive psychiatric history and from very early on spoke about hearing voices and seeing faces that other people could not see. She remembers once she was all alone in her dad's apartment. She had opened up a kitchen cupboard to see an evil face staring at her. She was so frightened that she had blacked out. When waking up again, her hands were bleeding and the kitchen was covered in blood. She can't remember what happened. When Michelle turned 18, she decided she wanted to live with her mother. The mother helped her get a job in the same place that she worked. This was at a place called Vasa Credit, near Stockholm. Even though Michelle both lived and worked with her mom, they had very little contact. Michelle eventually lost all contact with the rest of her family members as well. Michelle managed to keep her job at Vasa Credit and soon moved out from her mother's place into an apartment where she lived with a cat and 2 rats. Some of her friends were apprehensive about her pets, especially the rats, but Michelle had a line, a motto if you will, that she would always tell anybody who was going to visit her apartment. "You will respect me, my home, and my animals equally." That was her saying. The friends that did visit her usually respected her and the animals. Not only did Michelle have a very aggressive communication style, but she was also a big knife collector. She had knives in every room and was quick to grab one whenever she felt scared or paranoid. She would even bring knives with her when she left the apartment, often several. As a teenager, Michelle would spend a lot of time on a website called helgon.se under the username schizopsycho. Helgon.se is a Swedish web community started in 2002 for people with alternative clothing and music styles such as goth, punk, and emo. It's similar to the English language website called vampirefreaks.com, also popular in the early 2000s. The site was very popular in Sweden and at one point had over 200,000 active users. The site is a bit like a mix of early MySpace with some discussion forums about alternative styles and interests such as vampires and the occult. Michelle had a long-term friend, chat buddy, from this website called Anders. She would speak a lot with Anders almost every single day. Anders found a very good tone with Michelle as he was also into the goth and darker styles. But he mentioned that he found Michelle to be a little bit morbid even for him, later describing her as having a fetish for knives. On this website, Michelle shared many disturbing pictures of herself and even shared some long ranting poetry that in retrospective became quite sinister to read. I'll read you one of her poems now, translated from Swedish. This poem is entitled, "Mama, I have killed you. If only I had a sword to walk through the train with from beginning to end, slitting every throat as I pass one by one. The throats open up and I see blood pouring out of their nasty little necks. Haha, the fucking idiots. Did you really think you were gonna get home today? No. Today nobody gets home. I see that I have blood from the nasties all over me. Proudly, I climb out of the train with a big laugh. My music fits the situation perfectly. Even my ears are laughing. Even with the loudest volume, through the sound of my hate-filled music, I hear the sound of people screaming as they see the bodies. They see the blood pouring from the doors. The panic is so strong that many fall to the ground sobbing. This energy makes me feel calm. I feel happy that I've done something valuable. Fuck, how good am I? I'm really good. This bloody shirt should be hanging on my wall at home. That way I can be reminded every day. Although Michelle didn't charm anyone with her poems, she had had some boyfriends here and there, and she had just broken up with one of them in early 2010. At this time, one of her old friends, Daniel Stenman, started living with her in her apartment. Daniel was born in 1986, and he had lived some of his life in northern Sweden, but later moved down south where the bigger cities are. He had had big problems with drugs and alcohol from a very early age, and would drink very regularly. Daniel would sometimes become aggressive and violent with drinking, but he had never hit Michelle. He was more the kind of type to break furniture and throw things around. Him and Michelle never really had a serious relationship, but they were rather friends with benefits. Michelle explained later that she wanted someone to live with her because she was scared when she was alone in the apartment, and Daniel would do perfectly since they had some similar interests. Also, Daniel's mom lived just 5 minutes away, and he would sometimes stay there if him and Michelle had a falling out. Monday, 22nd February 2010. Michelle came home from a doctor's visit in the afternoon and found Daniel at home. He had been drinking and was already quite intoxicated. Just a few hours later, he was found dead in a pool of blood, with only Michelle left alone in the apartment. This is how she later recounted that evening to police. Throughout the evening, Daniel had gotten more and more drunk, and he started getting aggressive with her. He had thrown some things around and started hitting his fists into the living room table. Michelle said that he had even cursed at her and at her cats that evening. Michelle became paranoid because of all the commotion, and she felt like she was in danger. Daniel was pacing back and forth. He had walked across a little hallway into the kitchen. Michelle was in the living room and could hear Daniel opening up a kitchen drawer. That, she said, is when she thought that he was going to come back with a knife and kill her. Michelle had then gone into her bedroom and grabbed a knife from her collection. She snuck back into the hallway and stood waiting for Daniel behind one of the kitchen doorways. When Daniel walked across the doorstep and into the hallway, Michelle says that this is when she blacked out completely. She says that she can't really remember what happened, but when she came to her senses, she was standing over Daniel's dead body in the bathroom with a blood-soaked knife in her hands. She quickly threw the knife into a sink and paced around a little bit before she called her dad and told him that she needed help. Even though they didn't have much contact, Michelle's dad understood that something strange was going on and immediately drove to her apartment. When Michelle's dad came into the apartment, he found Michelle sitting on the living room floor with bloody clothes. He asked what had happened, but Michelle didn't say anything. She just pointed at the bathroom door. Her dad went over and found Daniel lifeless on the bathroom floor. His body was cold, and the blood had started to dry out. He was in shock, but decided to call the police right away. This was around 11 p.m. that evening. Quickly after, the police arrived along with an ambulance, but Daniel couldn't be saved. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Michelle was handcuffed and brought to the police station where she was interviewed that same evening. She told the police that she couldn't really remember what happened. She could remember the rest of the evening just fine, but not the murder itself. She said that she might have done something in self-defense after Daniel had gotten violent with her. The investigators thought that this sounded quite strange. On the scene, they had found Daniel with 25 deep stab wounds all over his body, while Michelle had basically no bruises or anything of the sort. There were also smears and blood pools around the bathroom, which led investigators to believe that Michelle had moved the body after killing him. Michelle was later convicted of murder, and because of her psychiatric history and the circumstances of her crime, she would be serving her sentence in a psychiatric ward called Karsudden, located near Katrineholm, Sweden. It was in this psychiatric ward that Michelle would meet Isaacin Daniel Johnson, also known as the Skara Cannibal. Isaacin had also committed a grisly murder in 2010, the same year as Michelle. She was interviewed while serving her sentence in the psych ward by a journalist who asked her about Isaacin, and she had this to say. When we first spotted each other in the hospital, we started looking a bit extra at each other, but we never really talked. Then a bit later, I was introduced to him during some free time in the hospital, and we started talking about all kinds of things. He really has my taste, with the tattoos and all that. He's just such a wonderful human being. I've always thought that I didn't really want children, but after meeting Isaacin, I think I've changed my mind about that, and I think that it could be a lot of fun actually. Michelle and Isaacin started dating, and after a 2-month relationship, they got engaged while still inside the psych ward. Both Michelle and Isaacin currently have apartments given to them by the state outside of the hospital, where they are allowed to spend some time in order to try to adjust to society again.